Hey everyone, in today's episode I'll discuss the worst places to buy property. What I'm talking about here really is the worst regions to buy property, and the reason I wanted to make this video is because I made one previously and a lot of people wanted to know what are your thoughts on the worst places or regions to buy property. I did mention a few in the past, but I'm going to get more specific this time and why that is. So in today's episode I'll discuss what makes an ordinary region for investment. Secondly, what people generally fall for, and then finally the worst places to buy property. Let's get into it. Look, let's get into what really makes a bad investment. And last time I did previously go into what makes a bad investment in some ways, but this time I'm actually going to tell you exactly what really makes a bad investment. And there's a couple of things I've listed here. Poor demographics is one thing. If you have a poor resident population, they cannot pay more for property. Another thing, awful capital growth. Like if you've got bad long-term capital growth, do not expect that to change at any point unless you have a very solid reason for gentrification to occur. And you can actually, I'd rather already pretty much see it occurring, like starting to occur, should I say, than even having a reason for it. Consistently high supply and little diversified industry, not good. If you have high supply, your supply and demand ratio goes out the door, hence there's no price pressure. Little diversified industry means that you've got basically a few industries that the town's depending on or the region's depending on. If they go sour, your town goes sour, so it doesn't really help. That comes along with also high crime rates. People do not like to live in areas with high crime. High employment. High employment is not good. It lowers your actual demographics of the area and also lowers the median incomes of the area, so that's also another issue. When it comes to also, should I say, awful capital growth, what I was saying about gentrification, if there's no wealthy surrounding suburbs or regions, it makes it very hard to gentrify. So that's what I mean in terms of that. If it has any of these issues, do not buy there. Simple as that. You cannot have a single one of these issues and expect an area to do well. What people fall for, one of the things is what people fall for generally are a couple of things. So the most common one I see is positive cash flow. Let's look for positive cash flow. That's one thing people look at. So here's an example of in the 1980s. So this is the early 80s if people want to really have a look. And this is just comparing a suburb of Brisbane that's really good to buy in called Wilston and Logan in the 1980s. So you can see here, I'm not making this up, this is off domain. Basically, pardon me, you've got similar price points at similar points in time in the 1980s. So you could probably even argue like almost they're exactly the same, or maybe even Logan's a little bit more expensive. But to give you an idea, today, this is what it kind of looks like. Not making this up, same street, same suburb. You can see Logan's basically done absolutely nothing. It's probably done about 4 to 6% growth, depending on what graph you look at. Wilson's done about 8.5 to 10, depending on which graph you look at as well. So look, chalk and cheese there, there's no debate. If we really want to argue as well, Wilston rents for about $900 a week now. Logan's about $450 to $500. So in terms of capital growth and cash flow, there's no debate. So let's just get rid of this positive cash flow nonsense talk. Like if you do really know what you're doing, and you do also have the appropriate budget to find something in that, and you know someone who does, like me, who can find you something like that, it is possible. But really what you want to buy is something that's going to do really good capital growth over long term, because capital growth is cash flow, because cash flow or yield is a percentage of the asset price. So hence you want that to go up, because you're paying off a property with yesterday's deflated dollars with tomorrow's inflated dollars. It's as simple as that. Another one, the off-market delusion. You got a lot of people saying, oh, this is off-market, it's pre-market, it's, I bumped into someone, he said he'll sell it for this and that and the other thing. So I've just got a few points down here. So we'll go chronologically because it makes sense. Off-market doesn't mean under-market. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're in Sydney, Marrickville's $2.4 million. You can knock on your neighbour's door or someone's door and say, I'll offer you $7 million for the property. They're going to sell it to you tomorrow for that. That's off-market, but doesn't mean it's under-market. So that's an illusion a lot of people, and it's completely delusional by a lot of people actually as well, that it means it's a good deal. Another thing, a lot of agents will try luck elsewhere before first marketing the property. So if you've got someone selling a property, especially agencies off market, what they'll generally do is before it comes to market, or they might be talking to someone, they'll message your whole database or message everyone that might be interested in it and say, he'll take this number. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good value or anything like that. It might just be they don't want to pay marketing expenses or anything like that. So I've seen people pay off market prices that I think are 10 to 20% overpriced, and they think they've got a good deal just because it was off market and no one else got to see it. It's not always the case. Another thing, it's an overused term. Everyone says this term. Like it can be used in some circumstances where it's good, but not all the time. I'd say of the deals that I do that I think are good value, I'd say maybe anywhere between maybe 40 and 50% that are off market are good, but not all really. Like when I say off market that I look at, I mean I will eliminate 99% of properties that I even see off market. I mean of the deals that I see off market that I'm interested in, so 1 out of 100, I'd say 40 to 50% of them actually go for a price that I think is appropriate. So when I say that, it's like 1 in 200 really. If you do the actual fractions or the decimal points, you really want to have a look at. But that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of how many deals that you would find off market that are actually good. Anyway, another thing is, look, it sometimes does work in hot markets. Though in colder markets, a lot of people won't say this, but sometimes it's actually better to take it to market just so it knocks the vendor's expectations down, because a lot of the time a vendor will, you've got, naturally speaking, vendors that always think their property's worth more than it is. And it's an annoying and I guess a sad thing, but like sometimes it's better in a cooler market just to let it go to market to knock their expectations down and then bid appropriately for the property. That's what you want to do. Finally, with these deals, what you're actually looking for is good value. It's not necessarily off market. It's not pre-market. It's not I bumped into my neighbor down the road, or I have an auntie that said she'd sell it to me for this. It's none of that. It's not on market. It's what you're looking for really is good value. So that's what you need to look for. Don't get confused. That's what you're looking for when you look to buy property. But people fall for the off-market delusion all the time. And look, one of the final points I just want to make here is that a lot of people will say, buy to reduce your taxable income. And I see you can just search up property. I guarantee you'll get an ad saying this on the internet, especially on YouTube. Buy to reduce tax rather than make money. And I've given an example here. I've gone a 600K build and a 15 years assumed hold period, right? A lot of these new estates and these new builds will do somewhere, and I'm being actually, I think, very generous here, because I'm saying like 5% growth. And I'm telling you, 5% is probably the best you'll get for a lot of these, unless it's in like an infill area. Like it's like, for example, houses built on a golf course. It's in a very good suburb. It's going to be like $3 million anyway. That's the only circumstance that would be different. But for the vast majority, most of these suburbs will do, usually 3 to 5%. So I'm taking the absolute maximum of this just to try to like give the people who love this kind of stuff a little bit of benefit of the doubt here. But I've assumed you can see one's doing 5% than just a standard 8% growth suburb. Mind you, I find suburbs above this all the time. I'm being as generous as I can on what I'm assuming I can find for a client, because most of the suburbs I would look for that at $1 million especially would do minimum 9, but I'm taking the absolute minimum just to be generous to make this look as good for the people that want to argue that as possible. So purchase price $1 million for each, one's 5%, one's 8%. Tax deduction per year, I'm assuming top tax bracket, so your 45% tax bracket. 200K salary per year. You'll get back roughly, and the thing is, I'm saying 600K build, so your capital works might be, let's say, I'm saying 600K build, so that'd be a 2.5% for 40 years of that. So that would be 15,000, but you're only getting, this is what people forget, you are only getting back your taxable percentage. You're only getting back, it is 45% of your $15,000 of your capital works expense, right? So hypothetically, you're really only getting $6,750 back. So that's times 15 years, it's $101,250. For the 8% growth one, I'm assuming you're getting 0. Look, just to be generous, like sure, you probably do get a little bit because it's probably got some level of renovation or something done in order to maintain it. But I'm being as nice to these idiots that like to say this as possible. Rent as well, all I've done here is I've just said what your yield is, and I've just done flat line. I've done flat line simply because look, I could make it a lot worse, and I'm telling you this right now because a higher capital growth suburb would do better in terms of rental appreciation long term. But to be more generous, all I've done is a flat line, just what is today's price, what's the rent per year today, and times that by the amount. So I've done that again to be as generous as possible because I'm telling you the 8% growth one, if you really did it by what the numbers would really be, it would be higher in terms of the actual amount you would get because the price would go up and the rent would follow it with it. The yield would look low in the future, but the rent would be significantly higher because the asset value is worth more. So one's 675,000 and the other's 562,500. With the capital growth of 5%, you got a bit under 2.1 million there, 2,078,920 on your 5% growth property. So your new build off the plan, rubbish. And for your 8% old school good suburb one, you got a bit over 3.1 million, 3,172,169. Your gain on your actual property for the actual new build might be 1.855 mil, 185,178,000 to be exact. On your 8% capital growth, it's 2.374 million, $2,374,669. And your difference between the two, and this is just in 15 years, which is insane, is $879,491. So let's not debate this. I've actually been very generous, and I'll go to that right now because what they don't tell you about tax deductions as well here is the written off values, and I'm not a financial advisor, but ask your accountant about this. Written off values add to your cost base if you ever sell. So you're actually going to have to pay tax on that again anyway if you sell. So they don't tell you about that, but I'm telling you that's the truth. Ask any accountant about that who knows what they're talking about. They will tell you that immediately. Again, I've mentioned this in the past. It is only your taxable percentage that you get back, not the full amount. So don't fall for that crap again. Again, it's the percentage of tax that you pay on it, not the full amount. If you're paying 32.5% tax and it's a $10,000 write-off on your taxable, you're only getting $3,250 back. You're not getting $10,000. That is a lie. Again, I've mentioned this in the past. Rent is a percentage of asset value. Hence, you want the value to go up. This example, in other words, would be significantly worse if this was included. I'm telling you, that number of difference in only 15 years would be more than probably $1 million if you included that. Again, and I mentioned this again, finally, most of these new build locations do awful capital growth numbers, often less than 5%. And it's usually, if I were to give you an average, probably somewhere between 3.8 and about 4.2. That's a normal percentage of growth for these areas. So I've been very, very generous. So for all of those buyers, agents and developers that like to sell this nonsense, you should probably buy me a beer when you see me because I've been as generous as possible despite killing every argument as to why you ever buy one. But anyway, that's what you should know about what people fall for, and don't buy it for tax deductions. It does not make sense whatsoever. I've spent a little bit of time now obviously going through why these areas are terrible, but let's actually get into the locations, and I can't wait to do this. And let's just start with Townsville in North Queensland. And really, this area has awful capital growth. I mean, terrible capital growth. So just do not buy here. Terrible long-term capital growth. I've been through this in the past. I picked a suburb in Townsville, Heatley to be specific, and I showed basically the capital growth over a 30-year period, really, and it's like 3.5%. Even if you add today's numbers where it's gone up to maybe 450 to 500,000, still like 4.2%, and that's after really good growth. So don't buy there. Here's as well, just along here in far north Queensland. So this is your kind of Cairns, your Port Douglas, your Tablelands, Mareeba region. So it's a far, far north of Queensland. Look, your best suburb does 5.6%, and these are your top 20. So these are like, man, these are the good suburbs of these areas. But that's how bad they are, like long term. This is from the Aussie Home Loans 25-year report again, pre-COVID. I like using it because it tells you what happens when you don't drop the cash rate to 0.1%, and it shows you what really the growth rate and what's going to happen in the future in these locations. So I'm not only shitting on those areas, but I'm also shitting on just to let everyone know, Harvey Bay and Mackay in that too. Add them to these areas. They're terrible locations to buy as well. Again, your top 20 suburbs, your top 6.7%, but the vast majority of your top 20s in like your 5s percentage mark, and they even dropped to like 4.5% in your top 20. So what would the other, 200 suburbs in this region do? What, like 3 or something like that? Maybe like 3.5. So we're really talking about terrible areas to buy here. Just don't buy in these areas. They're awful. I mean, you might get 20% growth this year. You might get then 10 the year after, but then you get nothing for another 15 years. So don't buy in these areas. Anything north of Harvey Bay, just don't touch. They're just terrible areas to buy. Don't follow the nonsense that any of these rubbish buyers agents are saying. They suck. Don't buy there. They're only good if you're retiring in about probably 2 or 3 years, because they'll do well for that. Then you want to sell and have a bit more super. It makes sense. But other than that, don't buy there. Look, I want to get into another thing, and this is a common one, particularly for a lot of people that live in CBDs, and it's any growth corridor exurb. And so for people that don't know what an exurb is, it's basically a suburb on the basically outskirts of an area, so that's why it's called an exurb. It's basically the outskirts of an area, and they're common around a lot of CBD areas. So these include Schofield's in the Northwest Growth Corridor, the Western Sydney Airport Corridor, Truganina, Tarneit and Melton, Craigian, Mickleham and Roxburgh Park, Eglinton, Okemos, Butler, Baldivis and Carna, and also Playford, Smithfield and Edinburgh North. Now, you can add plenty of other areas to it, but these are the main areas that a lot of people do tend to buy, that are awful areas to buy, so I just wanted to mention them. Do not buy here, and I'll tell you exactly why. The absolute ridiculous supply at the moment is crazy, and you're going to have a crazy future oversupply. If you don't believe me, just search up Truganina, Tarneit, Point Cook or anywhere like that. That's what's on this map area. Just search them on Google Earth. Put in 2008 Tarneit. All this here is farmland. Not a single house is built. Maybe 1 or 2 houses, maybe that are farm sheds, or maybe in the absolute center of town. There's barely any built though. And then you put in today's actual overhead, and you just see all these new estates pop up out of nowhere, and you can still see there's way more to go out here. All those blank patches are also going to be new estates. And then next door to these suburbs, it's also just farmland that's about to be the new estate as well. You can't differentiate any of these suburbs to what's basically going on in the future. So, if you have a 5-year-old new Metricon home here or something like that, for example, or new, Porter Davis or whatever home that you have out there, how are you going to differentiate from a new home in 5 years that's built in the next suburb or next estate in Tarneit? You can't. So there's no demand, and look at how many of these are on the market. There must be, like in this photo alone, like 100. It's crazy, and this was taken also like in January, so there's probably more now, because January is historically a slow month. So it's crazy, these numbers. But anyway, let's get into another one. Caboolture and Logan. Do I really have to go over this? Demographics and crime. This is just a Google basically search of just Logan, and this is just like, this isn't even over like a small, this is like in the last couple of months, and every photo is different. It's not the same thing. They're all different stories. It's not like, you search up Cremorne in Sydney or something like that, and you search up crime, and it's one story that headlines and all the photos are the same because everyone's got the same story. These are all different things that are going on in one spot. So that's one reason. But then you look further and look at the unemployment of these areas. So this is just an overhead of Brisbane. So the obviously lighter patches are obviously low unemployment, and the darker patches are higher. So right at the top there is basically your Caboolture and sort of Murrayfield area, and then down the bottom here is Woodridge and Logan. You can see Inala there right next to Logan as well, so don't buy there either, but I just wanted to make it simple for people. Obviously higher unemployment. How the hell are you going to get higher median incomes? How the hell are you going to get wealthy people wanting to live there? Why would people move there if there's no jobs there? It just doesn't make any sense longer term. So the issue is a lot of these suburbs are first home buyer suburbs, and people upgrade, so they're always going to sell because they never want to live there long term. So naturally more stock comes to the market because of it. So don't buy in Logan or Caboolture. Don't touch it. They're terrible areas to buy. Let's go into another one. Now, it's hard to say this because a lot of people in New South Wales want to live there, but they can't afford here. But really, it's regional New South Wales outside of the Sydney Basin. So for those that don't know where the Sydney Basin is, it's basically done by the Great Dividing Range, basically should I say, caps it. So it's really basically Shell Harbour to Newcastle. So you got Shell Harbour, Wollongong, the Central Coast, Lake Macquarie, and Newcastle. They're fine. Nothing wrong with buying in them. But everywhere else, so your Narooma, your Merimbula, your Nowras, your Jervis Bay, Coffs Harbour, Port Macquarie, your Lismore, Ballina, Grafton, Yamba, don't even touch them. They're terrible areas to buy, and these are a couple of the reasons. I also include inland areas like your Bathurst, Dubbo, don't touch them. Albury, don't touch them. They're terrible areas to buy. Reasons: little diversified industry. Often these areas are quite dependent on a few things. There's often only tradies that live there and often only government workers. That's all you'll get there. And for people that think I don't know this, my family is from Lismore and the Northern Rivers, Lismore, Evans Head, Brunswick Heads, Ballina, Evans Head, they live around there. So I do know this. I have family that live in Coffs Harbour as well. I have family also that live further south. So I've got family that actually live in like Narooma as well. So I know people down there. Poor income demographics. So these areas, I'll give you a good example. Lismore, the average person, if you ask the average person in the pub what they earn like $50,000 and rent is like $500 a week. So they're spending more than 50% of their income just on rent. That is not a good thing for long-term investment. Furthermore, you've got large supply issues. All of these areas pretty much have unlimited supply of land to build. So you're going to get new estates all the time. You're going to get more and more stock, and then it's going to be harder to sell. So I had a client recently who bought a property near Port Macquarie. I didn't buy it for him, but he spoke to me and wanted to sell it. We're wanting to buy probably a house in inner Melbourne and maybe one in a Newcastle again soon, once he sells it. And he's barely had a single inquiry over about a month. If that was in Sydney, I don't care how overpriced it is, I guarantee you get at least 10 probably in a month period, at least, because people still show up and they want to know what's going on, and there's plenty of demand there all the time. So don't buy with areas with large supply issues. Finally, poor business demand. Don't buy areas with poor business demand, because if there's no businesses, there's no jobs, and that means there's no people that want to stay there long term, and they can't actually afford to pay more for property either. That's another issue. So no good in terms of that. Also, look, I don't want to have to say it, there's awful capital growth in these locations. So I've mentioned previously the central west of New South Wales, and these are the top 20 suburbs. So I know, you've got maybe 4 that have done okay over the long term, but I mean, that's probably a anomaly. That's probably your black swan in this, and it's probably not going to happen again longer term. What you want to see is this average to be like at least 7% or maybe even a little bit more, at least high sixes to think it's going to gentrify, but it's not. The average here, if you add all the other suburbs together as well, is probably like 4.5 to 4.5% probably. So it's just awful areas to buy. So don't buy in these regional areas in New South Wales outside of the Sydney Basin region. They just don't work. Please do not buy there. Finally, let's just close off with a few others. I hate to shit on these areas, but Darwin, do not buy in Darwin. There's no real dominant industry other than government. So, look, this is just off census if anyone wants to argue with me. State government administration, hospitals, defence, primary education, other social assistance services, those are all government industry. Governments do not create higher income jobs. They are tailored only basically to do specifically jobs at certain bandwidths. And so for people in HR that ever worked as a manager, you'll know that if you work in government, if you're level 9, you might be paid 110 grand a year. Level 10 is a max of 125 a year or something like that. And obviously, however far up the levels you go, however good it is, whether it's ascending or descending order, depending on the government you work in, some states do it differently. But that's basically how this works. So that's one real issue. Also there, capital growth wise, it's just awful too. For a capital city, to have suburbs in the top 20 that are doing, under 4.5% is just insane. You'd think somewhere like Stewart Park, which is a more expensive suburb of Darwin that's right near the CBD, you'd think it'd do well. It's done 4.7% long term. How does that even make sense to be in a CBD area to even buy there? So please just avoid this area. It's not going to work long term. Just do not touch it. It's not going to work. Look, I want to finally finish on regional Victoria outside of Geelong, Bendigo and Ballarat. It's got very poor capital growth. So the capital growth is actually that bad that they couldn't, even in the Gippsland region, give you any more than 16 suburbs, and the 16th one is actually only doing 3.9%. So that's just terrible. Do not buy there. I mean, like, I know people that actually have mentioned buying in Mo, this suburb, and to give you an idea, it's kind of like towards Gippsland. It's out that kind of way. Just don't buy there. It's a really bad area to buy. You know, like, it just won't have good capital growth long term. It's got no demographics there. And I mean, the thing about Victoria as well is it's not like New South Wales and most of New South Wales where you've got like limited supply because of the Great Dividing Range. Most of Victoria, especially the southern end of Victoria, is all farmland. It's quite flat, apart from the mountain region. But like, I mean, the land's all mostly farmland and it's very developable. So I haven't even gone far to show you this. This is just in Wallen. So it's only about maybe 50 minutes to an hour north of Melbourne, right? And I mean, look at all the land around, look at all the new estates popping up. And I mean, how the hell are you going to have good capital growth in an area like this when there's just land everywhere like this? So don't buy in regional Victoria outside Geelong, Bendigo and Ballarat. Please do not buy there. Come to me instead. But anyway, we're getting to the end of this video, so I want to thank everyone for watching it. Please subscribe to the channel and reach out if you need any help and you're really looking to take your investment, or should I say portfolio, to the next level. Thanks again, guys.